Hello, my name is Donald Jensen, and I'm here for EDAD 701, and where we are going to be looking at different topics of director of instructor or instruction and curriculum uh, topics for today. So just a little bit of background information for myself. I am currently a special education teacher at a therapeutic day school program located in Rockford, Illinois. Um, I work at a pretty small program. We service 30 students, and our students come from school districts that we partner with in the area. We have three main schools that we currently partner with right now. That's Rockford Public Schools 205. That is the Dixon Community School District located in Illinois, and also the Harlem School District located in Rockford, Illinois as well. As we go through this video, um, I will reference the program, which is the Chance Light Education Center, as well as information that I'm aware of from our partnering districts. Um, from this past school year, though, in my program where I work, 84% of our student population was from RPS 205. So when I talk about other districts or information relevant to them, I will primarily be referencing the Rockford Public School District and any relevant information that is found there. We do have a lot to cover and a lot to look at. So what I will do is kind of break this down into each section. We have 4 sections to cover today, and I will read through the prompts and then answer them afterwards. That way, if there is any particular piece of information or question that somebody is looking for, might be a little bit easier to find what you're looking for that way. So our first section here, we're just going to build on some background knowledge, some of my experiences and time with instruction and with curriculum, and then we'll jump into our other sections here as well. But start, we're going to just share what I know about this course and what it relates to as to being a director of instruction. And my exposure with uh, being a director of instruction or director of curriculum is pretty limited as of right now. Um, the program that I work for at Chance Light Education Center, um, they are a private school company that services different buildings all throughout the country. So they have some locations here in Illinois, they have some in Florida, others in California. So we don't have like a central building where administrators are found or various people in lead roles. A lot of that is done kind of spread throughout the country here, but I do know who's in charge of the curriculum and instruction and some other lead areas here. Um, as far as being a director of instruction itself, I'm actually doing my practicum this upcoming school year for director of instruction, where I'll be working more closely and closer with those lead people than I ever have before. So I'm looking forward to, especially in my field, figuring out how they work as directors of instruction when there are so many areas they have to cover. Um, our second question here is discuss what you feel is drastically different in the area of leading in public education versus leading in the private sector. And I touched on that for a second there. I do work in the private sector of education, which has its upsides and also its downsides as well. Uh, Working in a public school, I think one of the biggest differences that I would see is the size of the school itself and the size of the programs within the schools. If you're in a public school, even the small public schools, are still going to have 2, 3, 400 students in there. And as we know, schools are a very complicated ecosystem. We have countless personalities, cultural influences, backgrounds, ethnic diversities, different character traits, personalities. You're going to have teachers, paraprofessionals, social workers, psychologists, janitors, administrators, directors, everybody coming in and out of the building, and all these things meshing with each other all the time. There's always a lot going on in a school setting. And I think that's true whether you're in a public or even a private school setting, such as my own. In my own private school setting at the Chance Light Education Center, we are a small program. We only have right now 3 classrooms in the program, and they each service a maximum of 10 students, 10 special education students per classroom. So my program, we have our director of SPED. We have our 3 special education teachers. We have 3 paraprofessionals. We have 2 social workers. And then we also have a couple other people in various roles that they perform throughout the school. And then we have our lead administrative teams who work with our program and other programs that fall under the umbrella. But even in our small school setting, we still see um, so many different students on a daily basis, and different problems arise for different students at various times. So whether you're working in that public or private sector, you're always dealing with a vast amount of different issues with students, with their parents, their family. You're also dealing with the objectives you have to meet from your own administrative teams, your own directors, if you're in the public school, the school board. So I think whether you're in public or private, you're always going to be busy. There's no downtime. There's no, sometimes it feels like there's no time to even catch your breath, no matter what area you're in. But when you're in public education, there might just be a little bit more like to deal with just because of the size difference there. Um, One big thing that I have noticed in the private sector, and I'm sure we'll talk about it in more detail throughout this course, is the funding or allocation of funds for a private school versus a public school. And we'll actually touch on that a little bit today in a later section when we look at titles 1, 2, 3, and 4. But in the private sector, in my public, not my public, but with my private therapeutic day program, we receive funds for our program and then for employees and everyone else, I know based off the number of students that we have in our building. So I know in Illinois, for example, if a public school needs to send a student to a private school therapeutic day program such as ours, the cost this year was, I believe, $257 per school day for that student. And of course, the objectives from the higher administrative teams is get students in the building. Uh, the more students you have, the more funds you are generating. So I know that is a big topic there. And that'd be true of, other therapeutic day placements as well. Whereas in the public school, the funding is, different than that as well. But we'll come back to that and touch on that in more detail later on. But next, we got to explain to me the structure of your current instructional leadership division within your current area of employment. Kind of touched on that in a previous question as well, but this year and this fall, since I'll be doing my practicum for Director of Instruction, I'll be working with those administrators in those lead roles. And those people at the Chance Light Education Center, there are 3 main people that work in the curriculum and instructional department. And what's unique about their job is they service and work with all the schools that fall under the umbrella of the private company that I work for. So, this school year, as I'm working with them, I may be looking at and tackling issues with a school that's not even my own throughout the year. Um, but, um, a big thing in our company is online learning platforms for various schools. Um, Primarily schools out in the California and Florida area, they have a lot of secondary students who get referred to their program and at a stage of high school where they might be behind credit wise or behind academically, and um, they use a lot of online learning platforms such as Odyssey. We also use eDynamic and GradPoint. If you've ever heard of any of those three, but we'll also talk in more detail about um, those online learning platforms, how they work, how students access them, how teachers access them, and modify and adapt them for students. But I'm familiar with adapting and modifying the curriculum for those online platforms, and then using them for instruction and in-person instruction as well. So I'll get more insight into that throughout the year as well. But in my current role, what experiences have I had that relate to leading instruction? Um, Leading instruction with students, I kind of shared a little bit in the last question, but online learning platforms are a big point of emphasis in our program. I use it sometimes. My students, I prefer to be more hands-on with students in my classroom and supplement their learning with some of those online resources. Um, this past year, since I was doing practicum as a director of special education, I was a little more hands-on with the other teachers in my program, especially because we had one new teacher come into the program this year, and she was unfamiliar with our curriculum and instruction because it does vary and differ from district to district, school to school. So I was a mentor for her to kind of show her, this is how we use our curriculum. This is how we modify and adapt it to meet the accommodations and modifications and students' IEPs, and other things like that. So this past year, I was more hands-on, um, really leading other teachers and showing them how we can, um, modify and adapt curriculum to meet what the students need. And actually, this next school year, I have also taken on the responsibility of being like a lead teacher in our program. We actually share our building with another special education program, and they have 5 classrooms in their building. So I will be the lead teacher of 8 teachers in their program, where I will be, working with the teachers and making sure that they are, modifying, adapting, and using the curriculum and instruction in the ways that, again, meet the accommodations and modifications of the special education students. So, but in my role, some standout experiences. I think one that a lot of us are going to point to would be the COVID and remote learning instruction when that's kind of took over in 2020. Um, when that hit all of us, it was very unexpected. It threw everyone through a loop, and I know on my end, and I'm sure many others as well, things are really hectic. All of a sudden, we go from we're in the building every day, working hands-on with students to nobody can go to the building anymore. Everybody's at home. Everybody needs a laptop. Everybody has to do online learning, online curriculum. We have to do Google Meets with students. We have to make sure students are present in these online platforms. And, that was a very difficult time for all of us. For me, and I think all of us again as well, it was a very, I think, a beneficial experience for us all. We live in an age and society where technology has really taken off and become, an essential part of our everyday lives. And even as we've gone back to in-person learning now, there are many programs and schools across the country that continue to use some of those online learning platforms or instruction, whether that's with iPads, tablets, computers, um, Google Class. And I think the effects from that COVID time are going to stick around with us for a while. Even students coming up today are more dependent on technology than maybe ever before. So, knowing how to be prepared and be ready for online learning materials, um, how to still modify and adapt curriculum to meet special education students' needs when they're not with you is a very big challenge and something that I learned a lot from during that time. Different modes of staying in communication with those students, with those parents, when you're not able to have them in the building with you, when your only option is to work remotely with them. Presented a lot of challenges for us, but I think there is a lot that we took away from it. Our next one here is, if and when you become the next director of instruction in a district, what areas within your current district will you adhere to in terms for growth? And we'll we'll touch on this as we go through the next couple sections here. But the biggest area that um, a lot of school districts look for improvement in are the state exams, state scores, meeting those state standards. Um, those are of the utmost importance to how we create our curriculum and our instruction, how we present our units of learning. Um, Biggest thing for me is just consistency in how we deliver our instruction, how we prepare for our instruction, how we assess our instruction. If we can have consistent methods of relaying information to parents, students, teachers, we need to be consistent in our approach because that makes things easier for myself if I was a director, and also makes things easier for those around me as well. So just consistency in my approach and how we're delivering our instruction is going to be one of the most important things that I do in that type of role. So that covers section 1, and there's some background knowledge there. For section 2, we're going to be looking at essential area of responsibility and roles of director of instruction, primarily overseeing federal funding. And in this section here, we will start to look, we'll start to look at some of our Title I, Title II, Title III, and Title IV aspects in here as well. So going through the prompts here, who oversees your state and federal instructional grants for your current district? Within my own school here, I'm not sure who does it for RPS 205, since we do work with multiple school districts in our building. Um, I know some information about, who does various jobs in those districts, but I'm more focused or more knowledgeable in my own therapeutic day program. On my own therapeutic day program, the person who was in charge of that funding and those grants from the state and federal levels is a woman named Sue Lesser. She works with all the schools in the area and she works with the directors of special education. We also have regional directors as well who work with our local work with our local directors as well. So Sue Lesser kind of oversees everyone else. She's kind of at the top of that, and she works with those, and then it branches down to the regional director and then our local directors. But Sue Lesser does oversee those state and federal instructional grants. About those grants at the state and federal levels, grants are a form of money that is used for schools to improve instruction within the schools, uh, funding that is used for students who are disadvantaged, funding that is used for teacher improvement, teacher retention, and quality. And we'll talk about those in more detail as we look at titles 1, 2, 3, and 4, specifically, where schools look to aim that funding, where they have to use funding, and some other things like that as well. But speaking of titles 1, 2, 3, and 4, we can do a brief overview of them here. And I can pull up an image here to share. Titles 1, 2, 3, and 4 are closely related to funding and again, how schools use funding. And then we're also going to cover some aspects of the Every Student Succeeds Act as well as we go through this. But starting with Title I funding was established by the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, and it was also then amended in the Every Student Succeeds Act. Title I funds programming for students for low-income families. The money must go toward helping these learners meet challenging and relevant academic state standards. So Title I funding, its primary demographic is used to, as it mentions here, low income students, and the programs or materials that are used that cannot have been used in other classrooms first. So main focus here, low income students, and how much money a school district gets from Title I or for Title I is really going to be dependent, as it mentions here, on the percentage of the number of low income families and students within their districts. Now, this information is public for us to look at. So if we look at the Rockford Public School District, for example, and I have it highlighted in yellow on here, Rockford School District 205. This is for the fiscal year of 2020 Title I allocation. RPS 205, Rockford is a big town in Illinois. I believe their population is 90,000 people. They have 5 high schools, I believe 7 middle schools, and I want to say 16 elementary schools, but big area, lots of students, lots of families. So, typically when you're looking at bigger districts, you're going to see, um, you're more likely to see low income students as well. Rockford does have a high percentage of low income families. And so, as you can see here in the fiscal year of 2020, their Title I allocation was $21,856,736. In the state of Wisconsin here, I actually live in Wisconsin myself. I live in the Delavan area. And just to kind of give a comparison there, the Delavan Darien School District, my local one, Delavan's a much smaller area. They only have 1 high school, 1 middle school. So you can see that their allocation makes sense. A lot lower, $448,587. So again, this is primarily aimed at low income families, low income students, and aiming to help them. Give some examples here. Some initiatives, purchasing devices, after school programs, or introducing curriculum in ELA and STEM. STEM is a big part of these Title I, 2, 3, and 4 as well. They're big parts of schools today: science, technology, and math. Kind of the big focuses there. So Title II was established also by the Elementary and Secondary Education Act and was amended in the Every Student Succeeds Act. Title II funding supports teacher, principal, administrator, and staff professional development. The money should be used to boost the amount of qualified educators in the area. This includes teachers who are prepared to teach STEM curriculum in the classroom. So, whereas Title I, we primarily focused on the low income students, Title II, we are looking at improving and retaining the staff within our buildings. We want highly qualified individuals in our schools, leading our programs, teaching our students. So, as I mentioned here, this is going to work with teacher, principal, and staff recruitment, professional development, materials and supplies, program development or implementation costs, including contracting with programming developers, and also stipends or substitute costs to participate in professional development or mentorship initiatives. So again, Title I dealing with low income families and students, and Title II more closely working with the employees and staff within a school building. So Title III was established by the Elementary and Secondary Education Act and also amended in the Every Student Succeeds Act. Title III funding is for English language learners and immigrant students. As it mentions here, the big thing to take away from Title III is Title III requirements are strict. Students must qualify as ELs or English learners and immigrant students under specific definitions. So to receive ESSA funds, an ELL or an English language learning student must be aged 30 through 21. They must be enrolled or preparing to enroll in an elementary school or secondary school. They also must meet one of the following criteria. They were not born in the United States, or their native language is a language other than English. They are a Native American or Alaska Native, or a native resident of the outlying areas. They come from an environment where language other than English has had a significant impact on the individual's level of English language proficiency, or is migratory, whose native language is a language other than English, and who comes from an environment where language other than English is dominant. They also have difficulty speaking, reading, writing, or understanding the English language. It may be sufficient to deny the individual the ability to meet the challenging state academic standards, the ability to successfully achieve in classrooms where language of instruction is English, or the opportunity to participate fully in society. So Title III funds primarily are going to be used for after-school programs, summer programs, maybe teaching technology, um, ELL professional development, and other forms of ELL technology as well. So far, Title I dealing with low-income families and students. Title II with the staff within a building. And Title III dealing with English language learners. Then to wrap up here, we have Title IV. Title IV is the newest of these title funds and was passed in the Every Student Succeeds Act of 2015. The funding emphasizes three focus areas: to support a well-rounded education by incorporating advanced classes, fine arts, foreign languages, STEAM, and other innovative programming; to create safe and healthy schools through the utilization of social emotional learning and healthy lifestyle habits; and effectively utilize technology through properly preparing staff, as well as provide high quality digital learning experience for underserved students. So looking at Title IV funding here, Title IV programs have far-reaching benefits for students. According to a report conducted by the DOE in 2020, states use Title IV funds to improve professional development around the use of educational technology and to build technological capacity and infrastructure. Some of these expenses for Title IV that we see are academic enrichment, STEM curriculum, mental health or career counseling, health and physical education, and integrating technology into the classroom. So the last part, integrating technology into the classroom. Um, that has really become a big thing in recent years, as we kind of talked about earlier in regards to uh, when we had COVID and remote learning. When we were working fully remote throughout this past couple school years here, technological improvements for student learning and student achievement um, became a priority for everyone. Um, we needed funds, we needed allocation of funds to service students who could not be in the building with us. And even this past school year, as we came back to in-person learning, the Rockford Public School District, they still had a small section of students who were working remotely. So this funding can also be used for, um, making sure that we have programming and resources to service those remote learners. Making sure we just have the technology that's adequate to handle online learning as well. So those are the big focuses with Title IV. Who manages your annual instructional budget that aligns and supports the district's strategic plan? I did mention it earlier. Again, that's Sue Lesser, who is the kind of again the head of the umbrella of these schools that we service throughout the private company here. But what do I know about the budget and my district strategic plan? As far as the strategic plan for the Chancellor Education Center, I was very loosely involved with some of our budget planning for this upcoming school year. Now, I know that our budget planning kind of goes back to uh, how much money we had throughout this previous school year. As I mentioned, as a therapeutic day program, we receive funding, based on those number of students we have. And, the longer we have 30 students in our program, our maximum capacity, the more money we are going to have to allocate it towards Title I, Title II, Title III, or Title IV, resources. Um, the less students we have, like for example, if we had a year where we were only at 50% capacity for a big bulk of the school year, such as we were greatly affected by uh, the COVID and remote learning. I know that our budget and our allocation of those resources was far less than it had been in previous years, because when we were on remote learning, um, districts in the area were not referring students to us anymore, because they had their own online learning platforms and things were kind of spread all over the place there. So for our budgets and our planning, really depends on what our year looked like. Some more students we have, especially servicing special education students. Um, we are going to need um, to make sure that we are using our budget and our resources to properly meet the needs found in the students' IEPs, whether it's modifications, adaptations, or whatever else that the special education students in our program do require. But what excites or worries me about any of these roles, from my own standpoint, uh, whenever you're dealing with budgets and financial planning and these vast resources that schools do deal with in terms of monetary aspects, that is a lot of pressure. That's a huge responsibility for anyone to have, even when you're working with a team or a group of people. So for myself, I need more experience in that field, determining, is it a percentage of our resources that we allocate to Title I and Title II? Um, do we allocate a specific percentage of our budget for our technology and our infrastructure in the school? Um, there's also, all the legal aspects of it as well, making sure that the funds you are using are being used appropriately and legally. No, these are things that I would like to talk in more detail about with the my department throughout this next school year. As I go through my practicum experience for a director of instruction. So, there's the conversations I plan to have and things that I hope to learn more about as we go through there. Our next section here is going to deal with some additional research just on these topics. Um, so for here, we have three main questions. We're going to identify the importance of data within teaching and learning. And primarily, we are going to be looking at um, data that comes from Chris Daugherty and his use of data to support teaching and learning, which is a case study of two districts here. So we can pull up the screen here. Data in schools is, of the utmost importance. And we use data for a lot of different things. So I'll pull up just some examples here that he lists. Data use may be thought of in terms of the type of data, the users, the uses to which they put the data. Some examples of types of data that he points out. We have testing data, which is district-wide benchmark tests given every 6 or 9 weeks. Um, in my school, we use STAR testing a lot. I know Rockford Public School District also uses STAR testing, which primarily evaluates a student's math and reading benchmarks. Are they at or below grade level? Are they in need of an urgent intervention? Are they in need of an intervention at all? So STAR testing is the primarily one used, I know, in my school and in the Rockford Public School District. But also school specific, common assessments given every 3 weeks, state accountability tests, college readiness tests and their precursors, and other standardized assessments. So these could be things like um, the annual tests that schools take every year for state assessments. Um, we also have other types of data as well. Classroom observations. This is one thing that I had to get more involved with this past school year as I was learning how to be a director of special education. How do we record that data? Where do we keep that data? On teacher performance, evaluation, and other employee performance and evaluations as well. Grades, of course, are standard type of data. Grades for our students, past grades, current grades, end of semester grades, things like that. Grades that might be sent out to colleges for senior level students, for example, as well. Attendance as well. One thing about attendance that I wanted to touch on quickly is one thing that surprised me is um, as I talked to different districts throughout the year, I found that in regards to attendance specifically, truancy kind of varied from district to district. Now, in the Rockford Public School District, and this is the truancy that we use because we partner primarily with them, the Rockford Public School District does not consider a student truant until they have 15 consecutive days of unexcused school absences. So, what's odd about this is a student can miss 14 days of school, show up on day 15, and then that clock or timer kind of gets reset. They can miss 14 again and show up, miss 14, show up. Just thought that was interesting compared to I did a job shadow in Clinton, Wisconsin this year, and their truancy policy was vastly different than the one in RPS 205. Their truancy policy was much more strict and rigid. A student was considered truant if they had missed 5 school days in a row, whether those were excused or unexcused. So definitely some different policies there, but we got to have attendance numbers as well. Percentage of attendance was a big thing I learned about this year. Um, we send that information into state levels and state officials who keep progress of what percentage of our students are in and out of the building on a daily basis. School discipline as well, when we have to write referrals, out of school suspensions, in school suspensions. Um, we got to have the data and paperwork and that trail record there detailing the information there. What was the infraction? When did it occur? What time did it occur? Where did it occur? Is there a suspension? How long is it for? Who did we contact? Um, when are we having our reevaluation meeting with the students? So, even within a discipline form itself, all sorts of data going there as well. Course completion, graduation, transfer, and dropout data. Um, working with in the working with the Rockford Public School District. Um, Typically, we see if a school district has a high percentage of low income students, that dropout rates might tend to be a little bit higher as well. I know in Rockford, their dropout rates had increased in recent years. Now is definitely a trend. Um, they were trying to reverse as well. And then also, I have data on surveys of students, teachers, or parents. This also does not cover, of course, every type of data that we find, in our schools. We have data on our curriculum and instruction. Within special education, you have all your data on students and their IEPs. You're going to have data on students who have 504 plans. Everything that we do in the schools now, we got to have records and information of. And it plays a huge role in everything that we do. It shows us trends, um, what's been going right, what's been going wrong. Um, do we see a specific pattern or, um, just again, trends going in a positive or a negative direction? And the good thing about data, and especially in the world we live today, is you really can't get enough of it. The more data you have, you're going to be able to make more informed and better decisions, which those of us who are in educational leadership roles, or those of us who aspire to be, when we make decisions, we have to make informed, objective, and fair decisions, and we do that through the use of our data. Our decisions can't be made on a whim. They can't be made on impulse or rash feelings or thoughts. We have to use the data that we have stored, we have kept, and that is available to us, again, to make informed decisions, make improvements to our schools, and ultimately, best service our students, our community, and everyone involved with that. And this will help our teachers in the classrooms to have the best practices, and then, of course, lead to um, better student engagement, better student learning, a productive learning environment, a positive learning environment. These are things that we need within our schools. The data shows us and helps us know how to arrive to those areas. Uh, Next, we have to compare and contrast traditional versus alternative approaches to instruction. Um, and we see that primarily here from a frontier research. This is from Jasmine Paul and Felicia Jefferson. And a big topic that they are going to look at is going to be, online versus face-to-face learning. Now, um, their work and study and data took place from 2009 to 2016. But I think, again, going back to our remote learning in recent years, we're going to see a lot of relevancy to the stuff that they talk about in their article here. Um, well, looking at traditional learning approaches versus, the maybe the new trends or the new things that we see here in our schools is they both have their place, of course. Face-to-face learning um, provides students with the opportunity to, um, be in a specific environment where they might be able to receive help or instruction in a much easier way. Um, when you're a remote learner, you are somewhat limited to um, just the resources that you have as well. Um, when you're working remotely, you're dependent on factors that are sometimes out of your control, such as the stability of your internet, the connection of your internet, your ability to navigate and use these online resources. And, while technology has grown in recent years, and the use of technology is very common in everyday life. Um, Online education is still not an easy thing for a lot of people. One of the most surprising things about it, though, is as they mentioned here, contrary to popular belief, um, online education is not a new phenomenon. First, correspondence and distance learning educational programs were initiated in the mid 1800s by the University of London. Of course, 1800s, their online education was vastly different than ours today, but it does have a long history, and it has been a long time here before. Um, Here they talk about some of the qualities of online and traditional face-to-face classroom education. Online and traditional education share many qualities. Students are still required to attend class, learn the material, submit assignments, and complete group projects. While teachers still have to design curriculums, maximize student instructional quality, answer class questions, motivate students to learn, and grade assignments. Despite these basic similarities, there are many distinct differences between the two modalities. Traditionally, classroom instruction is known to be teacher-centered and requires passive learning by the student, while online instruction is often student-centered and requires active learning. In teacher-centered or passive learning, the instructor usually controls the classroom dynamics. The teacher lectures and comments while students listen, take notes, and ask questions. In student-centered or active learning, the students usually determine classroom dynamics as they independently analyze the information, construct questions, and ask the instructor for clarification. Um, and that really is the biggest differences between the two, and I think they put it very well there, is teacher-centered versus student-centered. And as a remote learning student here in UWS, I see a lot of that, as well. I'm not in class taking notes or actively listening to a lecture all the time. But while I can reach out to any of my professors or instructors, there might be a little bit of a delay in them getting back to me due to, when they see their email, when their office hours are. When you're face to face, you have that opportunity to ask more direct questions, get more hands-on help, hands-on learning. So that'd be an advantage for students there. Ultimately, whether it's teacher-centered or student-centered, there are going to be some students who benefit from one model versus the other, or vice versa. And that's why I think a lot of schools, at least in the experience that I've seen throughout this last year here, have incorporated some online learning materials, even when they're in school face to face. I did a few job shadows throughout this year, and I visited multiple and different schools here in Wisconsin, and also in the state of Illinois. And um, as I went through these schools, I noticed that even though students are in the building, they're in the classroom, they're face to face with the instructor, they still had a period of the day where they had their tablet and they were doing online learning, whether that was through Google or Microsoft or some online platform. And growing up for myself, when I was in high school 10 years ago, 12 years ago, we didn't do any of that stuff, really in the classroom at all. We had various times when we would do research or some work on the computers, but that was pretty few and far between. Today, it seems to be a very common thing, again, at least in the classrooms that I've experienced. So I would expect that trend to continue as well. I don't see that coming to an end, because it does provide, again, multiple learning and student engagement, which ideally we want to meet the diversity of all students in our classrooms as well. Then the last thing here, we are going to look at just comparing or assessment in the classrooms. This comes from Bill Cope and Mary Kalinzis. And with assessment as well, I think the big thing to keep in mind with assessment is, assessment carries a very broad scope when we talk about it in schools. Assessment isn't just, looking at the math or science or reading scores of a student when they, how they did on unit 1, unit 2, and then unit 3. Of course, we do look at those things, and those are important. But assessment also helps us to identify when and if interventions are necessary as well. I mentioned STAR testing earlier that is used commonly in the Rockford Public School District. They use that as a big means to determine, when students need an intervention for math or reading purposes. Besides using assessment for students, we also use assessment on our teachers as well. Teacher evaluations are a big thing in schools. We assess teachers and what they're teaching, what their effectiveness in the classroom is, where they can improve, where they need to adapt. We're assessing all the different aspects of our students, our teachers, and other professionals in the building, and how all these things work together to create a learning environment that is conducive to learning and growth and meeting those state standards that we need to reach and that our school districts need to be aware of as well. So we're constantly assessing, reassessing, reevaluating, assessing our assessments, but always constantly looking at different approaches. Are we seeing growth? Are we seeing something become stagnant? If something is stagnant, how do we evaluate it from there? How do we make adjustments and improve our learning and practices in the classrooms as well? So our last section here is going to come from the primary textbook throughout the course, which is rigorous curriculum design. And primarily today, we'll be looking at prioritizing standards, how we decide our curricular units of study, how we organize those, how we assess and look at standards, pacing calendar, and also a unit planning organizer. So let's touch briefly on what each of those things mean here. So our first item of topic is, what does it mean to prioritize standards? Why is that important? So if we're looking at standards, we can pull up our screen again here. Real quickly, though, I will look at, just give a short overview of each of these topics. So we kind of have a baseline knowledge of what we're looking at when we go in here. By prioritizing the standards. Prioritize and vertically align from grade to grade and course to course the state standards of learning outcomes for selected content areas. These represent the assured competencies that students are to know and be able to do by the end of each academic school year in order to enter the next level of learning. So standards are showing us what students should know, how they need to know it, why they need to know it, and where they should be at the end of every year, whether it's where students should be at the end of first grade, where students should be at the end of second grade or third grade, and so on. Deciding on the curricular units of study. We have to name all these specific units of study for each grade level and course and those selected content areas. Through these units of study implemented during the year or course, students will learn and be assessed on their understanding and application of priority standards in focus. We also will assign the standards. Assign priority standards and supporting standards to each unit of study, taking into account learning progressions, those building blocks of concepts and skills that students need to learn before they can learn other ones. So what we're looking at there is, what do students need to know before they can learn the next unit of instruction? What standards do they need to have ingrained into their knowledge base before they can move on? A pacing calendar. Referring to the school district master calendar, create a curriculum pacing calendar for administrating the units of study to ensure that all priority standards will be taught, assessed, retaught, and reassessed throughout the school year prior to state tests and then to the end of the school year. Adjust the number of days or weeks designated for each unit of study so that all units with the heaviest concentration of priority standards can be completed during the months leading up to high-stake tests. And we'll touch more on pacing calendars in just a moment here. The last one, customizing the unit planning organizer. Modify the provided unit planning template to reflect your school or district's needs regarding a unit of study. Add your own language if needed so that teachers are not trying to learn an all-new curriculum vocabulary. So that's just kind of an overview of what we'll be looking at as we go into the topic here. But our first one, with prioritizing standards, we will get a look at that on this page here. And prioritizing standards, what they are. Highlighted here is the main emphasis. By emphasizing depth over breadth, we can do much to help students retain what they have been taught. Educators can then provide learning experiences directly aligned to a prioritized set of standards that require students to utilize higher order thinking skills and integrate present level learning with prior knowledge. So with standards, as I'm sure many of us all know, there are so many standards in each state, and these standards, the wording can vary from state to state slightly. It can be overwhelming for teachers to know, which standards are the most important, which one do students need to know, which ones are we going to really focus on. So with prioritizing standards, though, we are looking at which standards are we going to use that are going to help students, as it mentions here again, utilize higher order thinking skills and integrate this present learning with prior knowledge. So we want to identify the standards that are going to emphasize what students have learned in the past and how they're going to use that knowledge of things in the past to help them in the present. And that cycle ideally continues on and on, as we go through our units of instruction throughout the school year. So we're prioritizing the ones that are going to be the most important to our students, and the ones that they might need to really focus on and know and be well versed or well versed in when it does come down to those state exams that we do have to do every school year. Next, then we have our um, decision of curricular units, and we will see that here. Designing curricular units. The main thing I took away here is um, this being Kira, who is one of the authors of this book, has always suggested to the curriculum design teams that they name the units based on the standards and not the topics, because topics can be flexible. This then creates an opportunity for every student choice that increases relevance and meaning for students. Um, when we're looking at our decision of curricular units as well, I'm kind of going back for just a second here to begin the process of deciding on units of study for a grade level of course. There are three approaches to consider. So we'll go through the main three here, but that second one is the one that I felt was the most relevant. Approach one. Some school systems name their units of study to correspond to the category headings of the state standards. So here's an example of this. Units of study for the subject of writing can be named to match the broad headings of the English language arts for writing standards. So, couple examples: writing conventions, writing genres, and writing traits. Couple others they mentioned here as well. If you're looking at physical education, these might be organized to specific sports, like the basketball unit, the volleyball unit, soccer unit, so on, so on. The second approach is simply to use the names of unit topics within existing curricula. This is the approach many curriculum committees often take when beginning a redesign of their curricula. They believe it is easier to just use the same organizational structure that people are familiar with and build from there. However, Kyra has found this approach to be problematic because teachers may think that the units are the same as they were before, and then goes on to mention what we had touched on to begin with. What I think is important there, and I think Kiara touches on very nicely, is that we should be naming the units as just as she mentioned, based on the standards, because when we look at state standards, those state standards are going to be used throughout all the schools in a particular state. Like in the state of Illinois, for example, think about how many thousands of different schools are in the state of Illinois. If we name our units on the standards, this creates a more consistent approach for teachers to have a baseline knowledge of when they are, making decisions on curricular units. And maybe if we have, overturn or change throughout the school year, or we have substitute teachers coming in and out, this also may make it easier for other people to come in and be familiar with our units and what exactly they are looking for as well. Our next one here deals with the pacing calendars. As you mentioned, we will go to our page there. With pacing calendars, and I apologize, it is not going to the right page here, but talked about pacing calendars earlier. Pacing calendars are going to be dealing with, there we go, showing teachers, how they can expect to kind of get through the school year. So for many educators, a pacing calendar can seem to be either a friend or a foe. When it is helping an educator to stay on track to accomplish all the units of study by the end of the course or a school year, the pacing calendar is very useful. When it causes panic in the mind of an educator who is not able to keep up the pace, it becomes a real hindrance. To suggest a middle ground approach between these two extremes, Kira encouraged her teachers in McMinnville, Oregon, to strive to be within 1 or 2 weeks of the recommended pacing calendar so you don't get too far behind. So pacing calendar shows our teachers, um, excuse me, um, kind of like a roadmap. You know, from the beginning of the school year until the end of the school year, what they're going to teach and where they should expect their students to be at at various points throughout the year as well. One important thing, and that's why I did highlight it here, is pacing calendars can, as it mentions, be overwhelming for teachers. Um, Sometimes if a teacher falls behind in their calendar, they might kind of hit the panic button and think, well, I gotta start rushing this or rushing next. I gotta get caught up. I gotta get to where I'm supposed to be. And that's not always a hard and fast rule. I think Kiara does a nice job. Teachers should aim to be within 1 or 2 weeks of the recommended pacing calendar because you can afford to get a little bit behind. When we come back to assessments and we reassess and reteach, when we get to those reteaching and those reassessing parts of our units of study, um, those can be a little more flexible, on how long those particular areas last. When we're reteaching or reassessing, if students have shown that they have met all the state standards, they know the standards, they're ready to move on, we don't have to spend quite as much time reteaching or reassessing every single topic. And this is where we can make up some time, if we fall behind. But a pacing calendar is just there to give a roadmap, to give a guide to a teacher, to show them, what the year is going to look like, what they should expect students to learn, what a teacher should expect to teach throughout the year. We got to have a map in place, though, because we can't just go into a school year without a plan or without a guide. It's kind of similar to in sporting events. In football, teams don't just go to the line of scrimmage and the quarterback tells everybody to just do whatever they want to do and we'll figure it out. Where the defense doesn't just show up without a plan of attack. There's always preparation in place. It's the same thing here in schools. This is preparation to show us, um, a plan of what the year is going to look like and what we should expect our students to accomplish and achieve throughout the year as well. But next year we have assigning our standards. And when we are assigning our standards, we're just going to assign, what standards are going to be found in each unit. So, our pacing calendar, for example, this also shows us an example here. Unit 1 is going to be about determining the theme from details in the text. We can expect Unit 1, according to our pacing calendar, to last 6 weeks or 25 school days, and you can allow 5 buffer days in that area. Unit 2 is going to be starting on September 17th and also lasting 6 weeks with 4 buffer days. So that's like where the pacing calendar comes in, showing them, hey, this unit is going to last about 6 weeks. And 6 weeks is about typical for a unit of learning as well. It doesn't have to be a hard and fast rule. Not every unit is going to be 6 weeks and have 4 or 5 buffer days. There is some variance that can be allowed in there, but that's generally about what the average is going to be. But here, underneath that is where we assign our standards. What standards are going to be in each unit of learning. So with Unit 1, where we're determining the theme from details in a text, we have our standard here. Determine a theme of a story, drama, or poem from details in the text, including how characters in a story or drama respond to challenges, or how the speaker in a poem reflects upon a topic. We're going to summarize the text. In Unit 2, our prioritized standard is going to be to compare and contrast. two or more characters, settings, or events in a story or a drama, drawing on specific details in the text. And then in Unit 3, our standard is going to be explain the relationships or interactions between two or more individuals, events, ideas, or concepts in a historical, scientific, or technical text based on specific information in the text. But down here, you can kind of see, again, in that calendar, what standards are assigned to each unit of learning. And then for our last topic here, we have our planning organizer. And in our planning organizer, the unit planning organizer is a universal template to be used in every grade and content area in order to guarantee a consistent format across the school system. This blank template is divided into several sections, each of which is populated with the specific information relative to that section. It should include the common language and vocabulary consistently used and understood across the district, so that educators who administer the units are not confused by the unfamiliar supporting standard terminology. So the unit planning organizer is just simply a template that school districts are going to use. Good thing about them is they are, as I mentioned here, customizable, and they are flexible. So it can reach every grade level, every content area, English, math, physical education, social studies, science, first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade. Again, it's just going to include the components of the standards, the assessments, and the instruction, that are part of every unit of study. They provide specific sections related to each of these components. I think the main thing in here, though, to take away is the use of common language and vocabulary that's consistently used and understood across the school district. Again, if you have high turnover, or if you have substitute teachers, or various staff coming in and out of the building, these planning organizers need to be known and understood by a wide variety of people. If the information and the presentation of these organizers is inconsistent, or is too personal to a specific group or a specific individual or person, it is not going to be understood or be able to be used by everyone within your district. And that's the main thing that we need to take away from there. These have to be used and accessible to everybody that comes through there. So they're important because they provide consistency, they help provide structure, and they help our teachers and all those who work with our students, and administrators who work with teachers, teachers who work with aides and paraprofessionals, all to have kind of a cohesiveness and understanding with each other. So that is it for this week's topic. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope that it answered any questions that were out there. If there's any additional information that is needed, or questions that come up, please feel free to reach out and I will address those. Thank you.